Travel writers, are you getting ignored by editors way more often than you'd like? You pitch out into what seems like a black abyss and get nothing back but silence. If so, it might be because your stories are a bit dull. I'm not trying to be cheeky. I actually think this is really true. I think if we look at the big picture of stories that editors get pitched on a every day, on a weekly basis, you get the positively bad stories that are just unprofessional and crap, and they don't want to deal with those at all. Throw them away. Positively bad stories. Positively great stories at the top end, professional, got real good insights, great access, whatever it might be, really nicely written, great. But then the big chunk in the middle are just kind of average stories that are boring for the most part, are just kind of okay. They're not horrible, they're not terrible, they're just a bit, okay, average. Now, sometimes average stories do get published if other factors come into play, good timing, whatever it might be. But for the most part, editors don't want to publish average stories. They want to publish real winning stories, real grabbing, attention grabbing stories. And so with that in mind, I've got 6 things that I think can help you make your slightly average, boring, dull stories stand out. So let's get on with it. And the idea here is to, when an editor receives it, they're peaked. You know, they don't think, oh, seen that, been there, done that, got bored by it. Next, they actually think, okay, this is interesting. It might be worth at least having a conversation. So 6 things to make your stories more interesting. 1, access. Access is essential. So access can be to people, to places, to events, or to information. Access really sells your story. This is something that you can bring to your story that other writers maybe cannot bring. So this can be exclusive access or unique, but it's something unusual, something that's kind of intriguing. Maybe you've got access to, the great example that I always think of in my experience is when I got pitched by a writer who had access to the Gumball 3000 rally. So this is a rally that costs $100,000 to enter. You've got to have a supercar and you kind of travel around different parts of the world for a couple of weeks. He was a freelance writer and one of his friends had entered and he had a shotgun ride through this rally. Amazing access that of course I was going to assign as an editor. No other freelance writer in the world is probably going to have that story. So really think if your story has that kind of access, and if it doesn't, you might want to spend a bit more time working it up so that you can have some access like that. It can be to a person, an interviewee that hasn't been interviewed very much before. It can be to a place. You know, just going to a place and writing about it is often enough access. But if you can make it really powerful access, it really gives your story a big leg up into being assigned. Okay, point number 2, superlatives are fuel. So superlatives are words like best, worst, weirdest, loneliest, only. These are, and when combined with access, this makes for a really powerful working title for your story that most editors are going to be interested in some degree. So it's things like, you know, if we just had a headline or had a story idea, 6 cafes in Brooklyn, that's very, very average. You know, there's nothing really there to define it in any way. There's no angle. So instead, we get the 6 best cat cafes in Brooklyn. Okay, suddenly now we've got a superlative and we've got an angle. We might even have access in there injected somewhere if we get special access to behind the scenes or how a cat cafe operates, whatever, that sort of thing. But superlatives, so injecting words that really kind of make the subject of your story stand out or unusual in some way are another very important part of a compelling, sellable story idea. Point number 3, be anything but dull. Okay, so this telling you to not be boring by not being dull is a bit of a oxymoron, I guess, or some other word. But I think one of the ways to not be dull is to not be afraid of opinion. If you can inject a bit of opinion or a point of view into your story angle, this is a really good way of making it more interesting, making it more engaging. Opinion is the kind of the fuel of really engaging stories, and engagement is actually the kind of the digital measurement that most editors are aiming for these days. It used to be page views and unique visitors. Now engagement is a really big one. So getting opinions out there, expressing your point of view about something, both in your headline when you're selling it to an editor and in your story, so that people can then comment on it, agree with it, disagree with it, whatever it might be, is an important way of not being dull, basically. Point number 5, embrace your genius. So this goes to a point that I saw Michael Mead make. He's a kind of a cultural storytelling guru kind of guy in the States, who pointed out that the original usage of the word genius back in ancient times was nothing like it is today. Today it means you're picking out a 0.1% niche of very exceptionally talented or skilled individuals. Back in ancient Rome, everybody had a genius because it was a deity that followed you around your life. It gave you your kind of peculiarities, your personal qualities. It dictated how you observed the world, your interpretations of world events. It kind of dictated your fate and destiny through life. And I really like this idea because it suggests something which I believe as well, which is that we all have a very unique and special take on the world. We all interpret the world differently. And if we can identify that and embrace it and express it accurately through writing, if we choose to be writers, it gives us a way of reaching an audience out there, and not only reaching an audience and kind of telling stories in a way that's interesting to other people, but also kind of helps us examine ourselves and learn about ourselves as we go through life. What do we really think about something? How do my experiences colour my observations? How do I change as a result of these experiences? All very valuable parts of a travel story that is, that goes a bit deeper than simply surface level. So embrace your genius, write it out, and you'll soon kind of develop an audience, and you'll make a name for yourself as being somebody that can write like this. Point number 5, seek out controversy. So this is a little bit related to both of the former 2 points, which is to don't be dull, don't be scared of sharing your opinion and points of view about something, and embracing your genius. Obviously, the travel writing genre is probably one of the least controversial in the world, mainly a result of the fact that it is funded by advertisers, and advertisers tend to want to play around in safe territory, not up against controversial opinion pieces. But it can be a really good and effective way of being interesting. I did lots of this when I was at CNN, with very kind of provocative, almost argumentative opinion pieces, and they got loads of traction, loads of traffic. Some of my headlines included things like "Why I Hate Museums," British expats should be locked up, Asia is so uncool, it's cool, lots of others. Taking something that I believed and then just stretching it, pushing it right to the max in order to generate engagement, views, and to kind of and it's fun. I mean, it's kind of fun to see the reactions on stories like that. And I always think of Paul Theroux as well. He was a writer, is a writer I'm sure many of you know, who really made a name for him writing books, as it happens, rather than articles. I'm sure he did articles as well, but mostly known for his travel books, where he really kind of took the contrarian view on a lot of subjects that had been written previously. He hated the tourism industry, for example. He hated tourists, which seems like an odd view for a travel writer to have, but it really, he wasn't scared to be controversial, basically, and made a name for himself as a result of all that. Another example that I came across recently, a writer called Amy Stewart put out a piece on Substack. I think the headline was something like "Why New Mexico is America's best road trip state." That angle, that point of view, that embracement of controversy, and being willing to put something out there that was going to kind of rile a few feathers, turned what could be just a rather average story about road tripping through New Mexico into something that was suddenly actually interesting, provocative, made you want to comment, made you want to disagree with her, agree with her, whatever. So it's a really powerful element, these 3, opinion, embracing your personal observations about things, being willing to put them out there, and not being afraid of controversy. And then point number 6, headlines are first and last. So this isn't really a point about being interesting, but it's a point about always considering your headline first before you even kind of pitch out your story. and looking at it and asking it if it includes all these elements that I've just gone through: access, superlatives. It's interesting, it's not dull, there's some opinion there. It might even be controversial. Headlines used to be the things that journalism schools would tell you to write last. Once you'd done your whole story, now you knew what the headline should be. You've got to flip that about these days. The digital era means that headlines are such a huge part of what makes a story get read. If you imagine the old days of print, or even today in print, you got very few headlines over a load of pages, particularly in the feature as well. You might have one headline over 6 or 8 pages. So you've kind of got a captive audience. The headline does not need to work very hard. And that's why if you look at print magazine feature headlines, they can be rather oblique, and they don't have to say anything about the story, basically. Whereas look at a homepage of a website like the Daily Mail, for example, hundreds, even thousands, if you kind of go the infinite scroll route, of headlines all competing for your attention. So the headline is the one thing, that the most important thing in determining whether you're going to click that story or another. So super critical to really consider your headlines first before you pitch out, or even thinking about your story, creating a headline that you know is going to work. Can you fashion a story that will fit? And then at the end, making sure your headline, the story you've written, still fits that headline, and so on. So there we go, 6 quick points to consider when trying to be interesting as a travel writer. Hope it helps.